Good day, everyone. I'm very excited to be here with you, and I'm very excited to talk to you about telemetry. Let me know when you can see my screen. I think you can already do so. So as you may already be familiar with, nowadays everyone wants to be data informed. Data is everywhere, and it's only as good as you can basically draw conclusions and insights out of it, and as you can understand it. However, I think it's also useful to track it for decisions, for making the most out of your money spent, and basically understanding how it is evolving long term. And when it comes to intelligent document processing, I've heard from several customers that they have tried to track various metrics in order to either prove the value of their automation, understand validation time, and understand how basically everything ties into the ROI. As Christina mentioned at the beginning, while this is a presentation in which me and Nathan will share kind of like best practices we observe or we try to incorporate in the product, I also want this to be an interactive one in which you can also share your experiences with us. It may be the case that me and Nathan have only seen metrics or customers judging their success up until one point, but we don't see your point of view. So I would really be interested if you feel differently than us. My main goal for this session is not only to enable you, that you can enable furthermore either the business department or your customers or COEs, whoever basically is the sponsor of the automation program or is looking into understanding, debugging, or improving the automation program. So yes, while this is one of the goals, another goal of mine would be to see what metrics would be using from the product, which would help understand certain business questions for you. Can you work with the data at hand to improve? Does the data at hand help you understand ROI or understand the value document understanding is delivering for you? These are some questions which I would have for you, but maybe later. In a nutshell, me and Nathan want to cover these three topics. So first, we will be proposing some key metrics so that you can track what matters. These are, from our point of view, some metrics which basically give you an overview of the performance of your automations using document understanding. And then eventually you could tie this into your ROI. And I would also show you where you can monitor the numbers. So we provide several insights dashboards to understand these performance, not only as part of our modern projects, where you can see how many documents you have processed, validation time, and so on, but also understanding the cost, right? Because okay, value, but at what cost? Because somebody will end up paying for it, and the payer would eventually want to understand where their money went, how their AI units have been spent, and this is also something I want to show you. And then finally, Nathan, the expert, would tell you about how to improve the numbers, because once you understand them, sure, you can use them in being data informed, you can justify the value or the cost paid, but we always want to get better, don't we? So Nathan will talk about improving the numbers. To begin with, let's define what matters. Again, this is a proposition from our side of metrics which we feel have enough context so that you capture all relevant data points when evaluating your automations. Before going into that, I would like to know from some of you if you already have some metrics you track which would help you evaluate success. Do you already work with businesses, and do businesses already have some KPIs, metrics, something based on which they judge whether document understanding helps or not their business? Can you guys maybe speak up? Can someone help me?
Currently, most of the customers are, this is George here from India.
Hey,
Most of
George,
the
nice to meet
customers,
you.
yeah. So most of the customers are comparing it in Indian scenario, the time for processing the document, right? That's one. Number two is the ROI in terms of optimizing the headcounts, right? And number three, which is very important, is the risk coming with errors, right? If a manual document processing leads to errors, then there is a risk on any of the invoices, right? So they are trying to check it up on their risk meter.
How does your risk meter work? This one's interesting and I haven't heard of it before. I did, however, hear of the opposite, namely accuracy.
Yeah.
Cool. So if I understand you correctly, you look at the validation time, you look into some data which you can tie into ROI and the risk, George?
Yeah.
Cool, thank you. I hope that our dashboards will help you in this regard. I'll highlight some of the metrics when I get there. Can anyone else talk about what they measure nowadays, or do you resonate with George's metrics? Okay, if not, then that's fine. I'll show you what we have, and then maybe afterwards you can tell us what you think about. We found that a metric which kind of can demonstrate the value automation brings when it comes to document processing is the so-called estimated time saved. We computed by looking at the number of processed documents times the number it would take for someone to manually process the documents and excluding the total validation time. So basically here we would be looking at if I wouldn't have automation in place, how much it would have taken me to process these documents. And then considering the same person ends up just validating the extraction results, I deduct there. So as an example, consider that two documents are processed in 5 minutes normally. So if there was no automation in place and we end up not validating any of them, this means that for an FTE, I've saved 10 minutes. In this sense, we capture various dimensions. We look at the volume of documents by taking into consideration the number of processed documents, and we look at the validation time from two perspectives. There is one, the very popular straight-through processing rate, which sure is important, but paints only part of the picture because it only tells you how many of your total process documents end up being validated by a human in the loop. But then again, it should matter whether a document has been validated in 10 seconds, a minute, or 10 minutes, right? Which is not captured by the straight-through processing rate, but it would be captured by the total validation time. And therefore, this estimated time saved metric takes that into consideration too by only looking at the documents which have been validated by a human in the loop. So basically, with validation time, we look at the total time a user spends in either the classification or validation station, and then we consider it 0 for straight-through processed rate. So it kind of paints more of the picture than just how many documents have been automatically processed versus have also involved someone in the loop. Yeah, I noticed Shirley's comment. In addition to time successful document processing, meaning reduced if not error-free processing is also key. Of course, accuracy is another metric we want to track. Now, in this sense, we consider that a human in the loop makes no mistake, and eventually whatever errors you can detect, you would eventually have to check via automations or leveraging our business rule feature or leveraging our generative validation feature, all of which Nathan will talk more to you about, and all of which would basically contribute to the total validation time, because in the end, the purpose is to only validate what matters, because else how would automation work? I mean, it would work, but just very limited compared to its potential. Do you have any thoughts on this metric? Do you feel it captures enough, or do you feel something is missing? From our point of view, estimated time saved would kind of like give you, let's say, 3 FTE hours, 10 FTE hours. And then this you can link to ROI, because it's basically a time you save for an employee, a time in which he can do more meaningful work. He can do more meaningful work or bring more value in the end due to having automation in place. Karim, you mentioned it is missing the number of FTEs. Even if I tell you 100 hours or 10 hours or so, you basically would translate the number of hours into, you basically know how much you pay for 1 hour. So I'm not sure how the number of FTE would be relevant in this context, but maybe you can speak up.
What I mean is,
I can barely hear you. I'm sorry.
can you hear me now?
I don't know if it's just me, but I can't really hear you.
Can you hear me?
Very, very, very not loud.
Can you hear me now?
Yes,
Not-
I can't hear it either.
Not really, but maybe you can then type if you can't get your mic working. Sorry. Okay, do you maybe have questions? Because if not, I will move on. So basically, besides this North Star metric, we propose you track and we propose you look into, because it can directly be tied into ROI, as well as it is very complex, taking into consideration multiple dimensions. We have some secondary metrics which may feed into. For example, if you see a drop or a spike in a certain metric of this may impact your North Star metric, or the other way around. If you see the number of the estimated time saved getting lower, you may as well want to track the secondary metrics to help businesses understand why this may be the case. We, of course, propose looking at the total number of documents processed. This would support various use cases of yours, like how many documents have I processed by automations, how many documents I have processed in comparison to if I would have had a manual process in place. Validation time, I think it should be clear, as George also underlines. It was the total time validating the classification and extraction results. How much time, and for this, we would have the use cases like how much time is required by a human in the loop, is validation improving or over time, and so on. We also have a so-called average handling time metric, which basically looks at the total time a user spends validating the document divided by the total number of documents processed. So I was telling you initially, it matters how many documents have been straight through process, but this is just part of the picture. If I end up out of 10 documents having 2 reaching validation station, but each of the document requires half an hour to be validated because it's a 100-page contract, then you may not be so happy with your estimated time saved or with your automation rate at all afterwards. So that would be another metric to watch out for. And then finally, the field correction trends, which kind of is relating to what you guys were saying with regard to erroneous responses, or what I was telling that. So we track the opposites, we look at the accuracy. The field correction trend would basically tell you the total number of corrected fields by field modification. So for example, if a document type contains 10 fields, I'm interested into how many have been marked as missing, edited, for which having the value edited, for example, is a handwritten field. The OCR cannot really read the handwritten text, so it basically corrects the value, or the box is corrected because the model did not find the information or confuse the information in the document, and so on. And this basically would allow you to see now, are more fields modified over time? Is the newer model performing better or worse? Why is validation taking so long? If you see that a lot of fields have been modified, then I think that the question, why is validation taking so long? Yeah, maybe explain, let's put it like that. So these secondary metrics would feed into your primary North Star metric, which is the estimated time saved. And now that I've shown you what we track, I want to show you how to track these. So basically, we provide as part of modern projects, I hope you guys are familiar with, but if not, let me know and I try to give you some more overview about that. So basically, we've launched modern project for some time now in document understanding, which allow you a new way of building models in a document understanding project, a guided way, which we feel is more user-friendly, built around 4 components. One is building your model, measuring the model performance, publishing a project version, as well as consuming it in automations, and finally monitoring its performance. And the monitoring component comes with 2 sub-features. One would be the project performance dashboard, which looks like in this screenshot, but I'll as well show you in the product, which basically shows you the metrics, some of the metrics I talked about, but not only. All this data is gathered for your document understanding project, because in our view, you would create the project for a department, for a business unit, for a certain use case, and you want to measure its performance, or you want to improve its performance very punctually. Let me quickly show it to you. So basically, if you go to document understanding, I have here some projects. They need to have this modern label on. You can get that by when creating a new project, selecting the modern project. And then once you go over the building a model, steps, measuring it, publishing it, so you consume it in automations, you finally have a monitor component. This monitor component, as I was mentioning, kind of contains 2 subcomponents, the project performance component and the list of process documents. This list of process documents basically lets you see which are all the documents processed in my customer support project. And I can go look into details. For example, this warranty certificate has been processed. I can see when it has been processed. I can see the extracted fields for it. I can see that it has been validated by Arnold, when I can see that Arnold has not modified any fields, and so on. But besides that, we have this project performance dashboard, which is what I wanted to mention to talk to you about. Let me just put up some more data. This is an insights dashboard which we have embedded in document understanding. However, you do not require an insights license to see it. Here it's read-only and you can just use it as is. And here you basically would provide an input for the manual processing time of a document. This is then used for this estimated time saved metric, as I explained. So basically, considering a document would be processed in 10 minutes by default, having automation in place saved me 1 hour, and I paid this much for it, which is based on the AI unit cost in cent. Let's see, it's 8. And then here I can see the number of processed documents. I can see for each of the automations, for example, this is an API automation, this is an RPA automation, and I can see how many documents have been processed with each automations, how many documents have involved a human in the loop. I can see here the straight through processing rate. So basically out of all the documents, how many have gone straight through or how many have been validated by a human in the loop. Of course, we wanted the lower the better, but this is my test project, so I'm testing a lot. That's why here I have 100% straight through processing rate. No, I'm sorry. I meant the higher the better because basically I want to not involve human in the loop if possible and only involve him if it's really needed. Here I can see the straight through process versus the total process documents, and I have an average handling time. The average is very low because most of the documents I ran weren't really validated, but here I have some statistics with regards to validation of the two validators I mentioned, the total number of validation action created, and some consumption details from the selected project. I can see the top runtime consumers. I can see the field correction strands, which I was telling you would basically explain how long or why validation may take more or less. And basically those metrics I would use to improve my automations. I wanted to also show you the dashboard for the cost, but before going into that, I'd like to stop for questions. And I would also be curious, have you seen this dashboard before? Are you familiar with modern projects and with this monitor component? I'd like if you could either type or speak up. I would really be curious whether this feature reached you so far.
Monica, can this dashboard be integrated with visualization tools like Tableau or Power BI?
At the moment, no. At the moment, I think you just have the option to download the data in a CSV format. Basically, being an insights dashboard, we support whatever insights provides out of the box, and I don't think that they can do this yet.
Okay.
I have a question.
Please, Titus.
We build all of our automations in a non-production tenant. And once we've got it built and working, then we move it to our production tenant. It looks like
Correct.
from what I'm seeing here that these document understanding processes have to be built. You have to go through that process of building it in the template that, or in the tenant that you're going to be using it in. Is there any way to use these modern projects in the way that we're doing with building in a non-production and then moving to production? Or is that not available yet? Because I know what we're doing right now is we go into our production AI center and just import the project that we exported from non-production.
Titus, you
So-
can do the same with modern projects. We can
Okay.
export the project in modern and import it into another tenant. You can also pin when you publish a model, you can also pin that in the same tenant, but you can pin it for like staging or production as well.
Awesome. Is there some documentation that shows how to do that?
Yes, so
Perfect.
basically, if you go here under the modern experience, we have here migrating classic projects, and I think somewhere you would also have migrating modern projects here.
Awesome. This is exciting. Thank you.
Sure, hope it helps, Titus. If there are no other questions, or are there any other questions with regards to this dashboard? Have you guys seen it? I noticed Phelan's mentioned no. Validation time and classification time, wait time on this factor No wait time factored in for this calculation. So purely the time a user spent in the validation and in the classification station, excluding the time, for example, a task has waited for assignment. Yes. Okay, then I switched tenants because here I have more data. I want to show you how you can basically look into what you have, how many AI units you have consumed, because you may need to justify cost, right? And in order to do so, what you can do is, okay, got it. Go under licenses and here under consumables, and here you have AI units, and you may already be familiar with this capability. Licensing has already been exposing. However, besides this, we also provide some dashboards, some insights dashboard, which allow you to dig into more details when it comes to consumption. If you go into detail, if you go into insights, we have 3 dashboards which provide you insights into the consumed AI units. We have this organization level consumption dashboard, which allows you to see at an organization level how many AI units have been consumed. The data is displayed starting 1st of July, and here I can see all the tenants that have consumed AI units and where the AI units have been consumed from. You also have an entry for organization level. So basically there are certain features or ways to access a feature which currently do not assign the consumption of AI units at a tenant. Such an example would be consuming models via the machine learning extractor, which is authenticated using the public API keys. And in this way, we cannot associate the consumption to a tenant yet. We work towards overcoming this limitation, but these will be reported at an organization level. However, if you want to dig into more details about how many AI units have been consumed for a certain tenant, I can access the specific tenant level overview insights dashboard, for example, here for the Europe tenant. This dashboard would provide you more details about how AI units have been consumed in this tenant. Similarly, the data starts showing with the 1st of July and only contains data about document understanding and AI Center. I forgot to mention this. This is applicable for the organization level dashboard as well, with other services to be onboarded soon. These dashboards are currently in preview, and once we basically address all the feedback we've received, with more feedback to come, so you're welcome to share it with us, we'll also GA them. The tenant level dashboard displays consumption by product for each month. For example, in this case, I can see AI Center Rep was mostly consumed. And then here I can see consumption by orchestrator folder. And then I can see here consumption by orchestrator folder and products. So basically how many AI units have been consumed by AI Center and document understanding and in what orchestrator folders. And here I see even more details with regards to consumption by automation. So all my automations consuming resources or AI units, where the AI units have been consumed from, and basically the orchestrator folder. I want to highlight 2 things here. First, you may see here this not applicable. Not applicable means that it really doesn't apply. So for AI Center infra or training consumption, while we do consume AI units, orchestrator folder name is not applicable because basically the infra consumption for the AI Center is not attributed to a orchestrator folder. It's not deployed in a folder, the process does not run in the context of a folder, so it's simply not applicable. Besides that, you also see here a bunch of unknowns. We currently, due to the preview, have some limitations. One of the limitations is the fact that if you consume in a certain automation using public API keys, we don't have the data, we report it as unknown. Or if you're using old robots, old activity packs, which do not adhere to our prerequisites because our official documentation states that we need a certain activity version for you to be able to push the data to this dashboard, you will see them as unknown. We don't know how to correlate the consumption. We know where it is consumed from. You can see here the ID, for example, but we don't know how to associate it to a name. Finally, we have this limitation in which data cross regions is not reported and does not have a value for unknown, but we plan on addressing this by making this data available cross region. Yeah, let me quickly go over your questions. When the bot has a dispatch document to the validation to the action center, it will temporarily halt and then only proceed with manual validation. Consequently, this will lead to an increase in the average handling time. No, not really, because the average handling time only takes into consideration the time a user spent in validation station. So IDT, the time in which a workflow is suspended, the time in which a task has not been assigned, does not count.
Okay,
Cool.
thanks.
And then did I answer?
Yeah, thanks. I mean, I was just thinking, when we share the dashboard to the business, how we can show them that it is pending at your end, the time.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any way that we can extract from UiPath portal?
I think that I think that Action Center provides a dashboard where you can see an overview about, I think, how much time has been going on with the task not being assigned to anyone. So maybe that would help you better in this use case. If you want, for example, to highlight the fact that certain tasks are not being processed.
Okay, thank you, Monica.
I'm not 100% sure. I don't know, Nathan, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think so.
I will have a look on that. Thank you,
If you
Monica.
don't find anything, please reach out to me and I'll get in touch with the PM and we'll sort it out.
Sure, thank you.
Sure. And then Julian asked, these dashboards are only available to licensed insider organizations? No. So they are available in read-only mode without an insights license. You need an insights license only if you want to modify or customize them or basically reuse the data model in other dashboards, but by default, they're available to everyone. Okay, and then finally, you're welcome. Finally, George asked, can we run process mining on DU? This is something not related to the purpose of this presentation, but work in progress with us. I'm not sure that today you can natively, I don't think that today you can natively do so. A colleague of mine is looking into this, but we work towards having this. I want to show you one last dashboard before handing it over to Nathan and to you. Namely, we have a dashboard which is dedicated to document understanding and AI center consumption. Here we display product-specific consumption of AI units. For example, here I can see various document understanding or AI center projects and how they consume over time. Here we display the top 10 consumers in this line chart so that you have an overview, an idea of the evolution, maybe easily detect outliers, spikes, drops, whatever. And here we have the same data in a tabular format because here we display everything. So in my case, I just have 10 projects, but if you'd have 100, you'd see all 100 in the table, but you would see only the top 10 here because honestly, what would you understand out of 10 lines? And then we also have consumption by operations, where we highlight the used models or operations. For example, if you're using Forms AI, if you're using Digitizer and it consumes AI units, then you'll see everything here. And then we also have some widgets dedicated to AI Center. For example, AI Center consumption by AI Center operations, where you see hosting and training consumption. And then finally, consumption by AI Center resources, which provide you some more details with regards to the training and hosting consumption, like you can see the project name, source, and of course, the consumption. Loveness, I've seen your message. You try to open the dashboard and you have notification that Insights is not enabled. You do need to enable Insights on your tenant. You try to enable it, but you can only use it as a trial, which means it's going to expire. Please reach out to me with some screenshots. I'm leaving you my email address. I'm not sure why you get this experience, but you shouldn't. Maybe we can look into it together. Also, what I should have mentioned initially is that whatever I've shown you is currently just available on Automation Cloud. However, for both features, we work on adding them to Automation Suite as well. These AI units consumption dashboards are planned for the 24/10 release, while the project performance, I think, will come later because it's currently just being previewed and we still expect feedback for. Do you have more questions with regards to the AI units consumption dashboards? Because if not, I again would like to understand or ask you, have you seen them before, or do you have any thoughts about them? Do you find them useful? So I think you haven't seen them before, but it's fine. I'm happy that I've shown them to you. I think they at least show you the means of possibilities and you can give them a try and reach out to me. This was everything I wanted to mention to you about how to define some metrics you can track as well as where to see them in the product. I would like to hand it over to Nathan so that now Nathan can tell you about how to improve them. And I'll be, of course, available on the chat.
Thanks, Monica. Hopefully everyone can see my screen. Okay. the
Yes,
presentation.
you're on, Nathan.
Thank you. Awesome.
Sure.
Perfect. We'll go through some of the stuff that even Monica went over and kind of like how we look at it, how can we take improvement on it, even in the kind of design time and build time of a model, but then also even within, you know, kind of the studio work flow for runtime operations. So a lot of times we kind of start off with like what questions you need answers, you need answered to, which is like, first off is like, what are the key value drivers of the project? How do I make this successful? What am I aiming towards? Am I trying to reduce cost, penalty avoidance, maybe from an SLA? Am I looking for time savings or increased throughput because of seasonality reasons or because of growth? Or even like faster customer response time to maybe improve your customer experience. And so we have a bunch of levers that we can use inside of a document understanding process from build to execution to kind of improve and answer some of these questions that you are looking for the project. And we'll go through some of these in the demo as well, right? And so model output, like what fields are being extracted? Are you only exporting or extracting fields that are necessary for the business process? What doc types are being classified? Classification is sometimes optional, right? If you're not having to, you know, classify different doc types to send them into different extractors, you might not need a classification. But the goal here would be to, you know, extract fields that are required for the business process. We have certain things that we can use for automated validation, things like confidence thresholds, business rules were mentioned before, system of record lookups where I can pre-validate a field with a database, for instance. And then human validations. How long does it take to validate one, an exception, or also for doc type fields validations, either for corrections or just to validate a correct field as well. And we talk about average handling time a lot, and this is kind of like our main focus because it's one of the biggest levers that we can use to reduce cost and also time savings and increased throughput. And so we will spend quite a bit of time here as well. Data export in terms of like model accuracy, output accuracy, and we view kind of output accuracy and model accuracy as two different things, right? So just because the model predicted something as an accurate prediction, is that output accuracy correct as well? And we really look at this in terms of like, hey, is there a OCR error where the model was accurate, but the OCR missed a character or missed part of the document characters inside of that. And so we'll look at that as well in terms of like how we can validate that as in human-in-the-loop. Some of the questions that you can see is like, what are the most frequent reasons a document is rejected? And we look at this in terms of like, one, the reason frequency around how often it's happening. This could be in terms of an extraction or in terms of like classification. Maybe it was classified wrong. Maybe the extraction document wasn't meant for the appropriate extractor. So that needs to be rejected and used in terms of like manual processing. If we look at this in terms of like how much time my department is saving each week, again, this is something that we talked about and Monica talked about in the initial slide is time savings, where we compare the automated process to the as-is process when we're looking at a document understanding project. And if we look at the automated process, we'll take the number of documents with the manual intervention rate with average handling time. And then with the as-is process, it's essentially the same thing. Number of documents, manual intervention rate, along with the average handling time. Now, when we look at this in terms of the manual intervention rate, it's the number of documents processed here with the number of exceptions. And then same thing for average handling time, number of documents with the validation duration in terms of validation duration for extraction and classification, along with the rejection reason, right? This could be, again, what we went over on the last slide in terms of like, was it rejected for the extraction or classification? And these are things that we do track in modern projects automatically, right? You'll be able to see what the rejection reason was for extraction or classification. And then you can also track the validation duration for extraction and duration. And really, this is kind of, what we want to focus on in terms of the document lifecycle, right? Is that total processing time and really some of the levers that we can use to reduce the validation duration. And so let's look at some of these that we have. So the main ones that we look for is optimizing the model training and performance. This is going to, again, bring accuracy up immediately, and you'll get, again, higher accuracy scores, meaning the less validation that you will have to do, less corrections that you'll have to do for the model. You can use confidence scores as a lever if the business rule is not available. In terms of like, you can look at the model certainty or uncertainty. There's things in the automation that you can automatically set in terms of thresholds that you can use for action center review. Business rules is, again, it's the primary mechanism that we use in terms of like how to pre-validate and maybe hide fields from certain validation because they've been pre-validated. And then generative validation, this is something that can boost confidence scores of an extracted value with the use of comparing the model output with the generative AI and boosting that confidence score. Business rules when you can, and kind of human in the loop as you must as we're looking through this. And so again, we can try to validate this with external verification with some type of system of record, if you can, from a PO number. You can also, if you're using communications mining, you might be able to validate and compare what was in the subject line that communications mining extracted versus what was in the attachment of that document with document understanding. So you can use these two tools to compare values against each other to see if they match or not. You can also do basic math equations here where, line item plus tax equal the total. And then, for dates, you might not be reliant upon a business rule, or there might not be one available where you can, use a confidence score to help validate that field as well. Okay. If we look at this in terms of like, what does confidence score look like in practice? It really goes back to the point around the accuracy of data and then what is the impact of that. And so you can set a threshold inside of your automation. And if we look at that, what goes low confidence, basically below that threshold, if it's correct, you can just review the field and validate it. And if it's incorrect, then you can correct the field inside of human in the loop. If we look at this in terms of like high confidence, where it's above the threshold, you can see that if it's incorrect, the field gets submitted incorrectly by the automation. If it's correct, obviously the field gets submitted correctly. The question that you really need to ask yourself here in terms of like, what is the impact of having incorrect data being put into the destination system? For things that might be used for analytical purposes, it might be okay to have that field submitted incorrectly. But if you're looking in terms of like what to pay someone or a brokerage statement, that might have much more broader and grave impact in terms of like having that field being submitted incorrectly. So it's something that you have to be careful with in setting this in terms of like the different thresholds. And there's safe ways to do this inside of Action Center where, you can have it be validated, but you can kind of still do a quick once over across the different fields. Okay. If we're looking at, generative validation here, we can again see that we can do automated validation with generative validation as well, where we can start comparing specialized model with generative model and boosting that confidence score. So it's kind of like a second opinion for the automation. So let's take an example where the specialized model had a confidence score of the PO number of 59%. We're going to ask generative validation as well to see if it got the same value of that. And if those values match, we can increase that confidence score to 85%. This is something that you can, set as your threshold that you feel comfortable with inside of your automation. Okay. So with that, we'll take a look at what that looks like. So I'll kind of walk through that in terms of some of the levers that you can use inside of your extracted data scope. So if I look at extracting data for checks, I can go into additional properties here, and you'll see one of the levers here is auto validation. And this is just an on or off, and you can set the auto validation confidence threshold to a number that you feel comfortable with. This is something that will look for the confidence for that generative validation. So this is what the confidence threshold will be boosted to if they match with the specialized model. Another one would be for the validation for human in the loop, right? I can go into, again, other properties here where I can have a extracted fields validation confidence threshold. In this particular case, I have assigned that to a variable, and you can again, have their a default value associated with that as well. And again, this is going to be linked to the confidence threshold, and it will basically set a automatic filter inside of this for your validation human in the loop experience. So I'll just run this quickly here, which will, apply all of those levers to the document that I'm extracting. And it will place a task inside of my Action Center. let this run here. So you can see it's extracting the data. Once it's extracted, it will create an Action Center task, and then we can go take a look at that inside of Action Center. But these are very simple things that can be configured. As you can see, you can set these confidence thresholds very easily with your extraction. Please note that this is charging you an extra AI unit as you are doing this, right? Because you're basically using generative AI to compare that particular value. So let me go ahead and assign this task to myself. And so here now you can see that I've got a threshold set for 0% to 85%. And so that's what that validation confidence threshold is doing, is I can see like immediately what fell underneath that, or whether it's missing or not. And so I can say, I can validate that field. And then I can also, here where it's missing, where it didn't extract it, click on the account number and hit the hotkey. Once that's done, you can also see all of the validated fields and see if anything was incorrect here. You can also see like the bank name is incorrect. So you can look at that in terms of like correcting the bank name, where you can actually highlight the tokens that are associated with that and then correct that field as well. And I can submit that for downstream processing. So what I want to look for is like, well, let's look at some of the fields that are associated with that model, right? So if I go into document understanding the project, I can see that I've trained this model on 28 documents. I can also see that I've got, immediate recommendations in terms of like, to add more samples to this. But the first thing I do after looking at or annotating all of these is I go to measure and see like, my overall model accuracy has a percentage of 96%. But then I want to go and look at metrics. And you can see like bank name, the one that we just corrected, has a fairly low accuracy field accuracy. So how would I go about, first of all, looking at that to see if things are correct? So if I go back to build, we can go into kind of like the annotations, and you can start filtering on specific fields that you'd like to look at. So let's take a look at bank name and see if like we've done anything incorrect or if things look okay. So here we can see like the bank name in this particular case is incorrectly labeled, right? And so we want to correct that labeling in terms of what the model thinks the bank name would be. We can also look at other ones as well. We can see like, okay, this one looks correct. Let's look at the next one. This one has a bank name here that's labeled, but if we're going through labeling best practices, we should also label this bank name, which is maybe part of the reason why it missed the bank name on the one that we just validated, because bank names can be found in different parts of the check, right? So first thing you want to do is check for labeling mistakes or maybe labeling inconsistencies. Another thing that I would do here is add additional documents per the recommendation and also label that, which will produce a new model that I can publish and measure against, right? Which will bring, again, that confidence score up. As Monica mentioned and kind of went over a lot of these dashboards here as well, you can kind of see that the rejection reasons, as I mentioned in the slides, those are all going to be documented in this as well. You can see like if I'm consuming this via the API, you can also see if I'm consuming it via an RPA automation. 8's the one that I just ran through. You can also click on these, which will provide an immediate filter on that automation, so you can actually see what was done from a particular process, right? Not just overall. You can also see why things were rejected, right? So if I'm in Action Center and I'm providing a rejection reason, you will see all of those reasons here, and then the number that's going to be associated with that as well. Okay. You also see unassigned tasks here. I've completed all of mine, but you can see that when we're looking at this, you'll see any type of rejection reasons why it was rejected in terms of like extraction validation or classification, where it might need additional docs to increase the classification accuracy. Again, down here, we see some runtime metrics
Nathan?
around. Yes.
Nathan, do you have a lot of content left? Because
No, that's it.
okay. Cool.
That's it.
Sorry for
I don't have
interrupting.
any content left. I just wanted to showcase, like, it will show errors as well in terms of like the consumer, whether it's a classifier or an extractor error. But let me get back to the slides and the after actions here. Okay. Do you want to present on the next steps for bonus content? We have our LinkedIn profiles that we can leave as well, and then the next dev dive sessions. Christina, did
Yes.
you want to add anything to this?
No, I think we are good. So basically, we have the link for our bonus content. We also you also saw this link in the beginning, and my colleagues are just sharing it right now in the chat. The links to the content, the LinkedIn profiles for you and Monica, of course, they were already shared in the chat, and for sure we would like to have you in our next dev dive sessions. You can see all the past and sessions and upcoming sessions on the series page, Dev Dives 2024, and you can also directly join our next October session for America region and for EMEA APJ region. We're glad you enjoyed the session. Are there any closing questions? Is there anyone who has any questions left, like for Q&A for Nathan, maybe? That's a lot of good feedback in the chat.
Thanks a lot, everyone. Thanks for listening to us and looking forward to connecting with you and more feedback from you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.